This is an RNZ podcast.
25 to 9 here on RNZ National. Otherwise known on a Wednesday night as... Go on, Colin, you can do it.
8:35 Wednesday, 3rd of December. Well, you call it Midweek Media Watch O'Clock. I mean, I think you've got to own it.
You embrace it. You tell me off when I don't call it Midweek Media Watch O'Clock.
Like Mike Tyson didn't come into the ring and go, "Let's get ready to rumble." It's got to be the hype guy.
That's true.
You're the person in
name?
the bikini with the stilettos holding up the board that says round 2.
The guy Buffer, that's the guy who does the boxing. It's brothers.
I'm the one twitching in the corner, getting a mouth guard put in. And
Bruce Buffer does the UFC ring announcing, but then his brother does the... Is it Michael? I think it's Michael Buffer. He does the boxing, and his voice is insured for $200 million. That's I swear that's true, Colin. I swear that's true, and you can media watch me if it's not.
I'd like to be the actuary that that sorted out the spreadsheet and the total. I've worked this out, guys.
That would be great. What a wonderful interview that'd be. All right, let's talk about the media. And last week, the political talk was all about the possible rolling of the Prime Minister. This week, not so much. The media coverage of this, absolutely fascinating, Colin. Take it away.
The chatter was the word, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Lots of chatter and noise. Yeah, so I had a bit of was it a gripe? I don't know. I guess I laid it out a bit on Media Watch last Sunday because so many of this, and there were so many stories and bits of commentary, and they all just seem so similar. People talking about there being chatter, referencing the unpopularity of the Prime Minister in various polls or whatever, but no names. I guess you don't expect people to commit career suicide by naming themselves or putting themselves on the record about rolling the PM and all of that. But it was frustrating, and I kind of felt like it would be great if editors could maybe just limit the amount of stuff they publish about this one thing until it really moves on. So we're not reading floods of it. I wasn't the only one. Incidentally, Steve Braunius did quite a funny piece for Newsroom, his secret diary style, and it was sort of based on sort of spoof fishing expedition type questions being asked by reporters about, dear Prime Minister, are you facing a tsunami of unstoppable momentum behind your departure? And him saying no, and the reporters, well, there you have it, complete denial that Luxon is not being led down a cul-de-sac to hell and all this sort of stuff. It was quite well done. But in the Sunday Star Times, Andrea Vance went a bit further. She described this as a failed coup. And filled in a few of the blanks. I think the piece was actually headlined, the anatomy of a coup. And one intriguing thing was it is an opinion piece, the way it was written. Stuff actually wrote a news story off it.
Yes, I was fascinated by this.
But then it pulled out. So I don't know. I don't know what was in the story. But, as has been pointed out, interesting that, the opinion piece is the one that survives, and it's, couched in Andrea Vance's, analysis. But the news piece wasn't, for some reason, deemed to be sort of able to stand on its own accord. So, interesting.
It has an editor's note at the bottom of that piece now. An earlier news story based on this column has been retracted, which... and
it doesn't say why. So, that's curious because, as I say, Andrea Vance's story did take it a bit further. I saw an online comment going, this is just a puffed up version of everything else we've seen. No names, supposition, putting two and two together, and so on. But she honestly said in her piece and put her name to it that, Chris Bishop did not have the numbers and himself or others were inquiring, likewise for the other name referenced as a possible successor, Erica Stanford. So that went a little bit further, but that's as far as it went. And intriguing, but not enough for an actual news story.
Yeah. So no news story. So has the coup story gone away then?
Andrea Vance said no in the same piece. She's saying Luxon may have won the week, but still hasn't solved the underlying problems. His corporate uplift, as she put it, just isn't connecting with voters. Bishop, bruised as he is, she writes, remains the most credible alternative. He stands out as the minister making the most visible difference and won't be lying low for long. But, in the same piece she was saying, he's got a problem. He's regarded as a kind of liberal wing of the party. The rural wing might not like him, particularly depending on his deputy, blah, blah, blah. So, all of that. I mean, it wasn't just her and stuff. RNZ published a How Political Coups Happen explainer that they had lined up for the weekend. And Tim Murphy, former Herald editor, current Newsroom co-editor, reposted Andrea Vance's piece online with him saying, here's Andrea's piece on the coup that wasn't this time. And then he says, long-time political writer at the Press, Oliver Riddell, used to say of political coup attempts, each time the tide comes in, it comes further up the beach.
There's a nice turn of phrase, isn't
Although
it?
that could have been one of Steve Braunius's ones in his spoof secret diary,
Right,
couldn't it? The
yeah.
reporter saying, Prime Minister, is it not true that each time the tide comes in, it comes further up the beach? And just has him denying it.
It's quite Eric Cantona, that phrase, isn't it?
Yes, it is a bit.
So, I mean, what do you make of this from the Prime Minister's point of view? Has Luxon won this in the meantime? Any credit from the media for not being rolled?
Not really, although Andrea Vance did say for a guy who's often condemned for having poor or underdeveloped political instincts, he kind of outmaneuvered Chris Bishop. But he did push back a bit on his regular Monday morning round of interviews, his Mike Hosking ZB breakfast interview. It was interesting. He brought it up himself when Mike Hosking asked about promising results that were kind of ignored by the media, he felt, from our schools.
That was really great news, and I think parents care about that. But instead, some of the media went off about a leadership change that isn't happening, and secondly, went and spent the whole time talking about Section 127 and treaty principles.
And barely a minute after that, Mike Hosking asked him this question.
What is it you face in election year? Is this deliberate, do you think, on behalf of some in the media who will, come hell or high water, simply not cover good news?
I think some of the media are just so disconnected from the reality of where Kiwis are at. And, when I'm up and down this country, I'm telling you, parents want to talk about how their kids are going and what's going on in education. They want to talk about their mortgage rates. They want to talk about what we're doing to make the country better. And you actually get... some media just fixated on, a story that actually isn't happening, not happening, and actually more importantly than something that's we've already made a decision on. We've moved on.
He's moved on, Emil. See, twice he's mentioned the media giving him a hard time about something that's not happening, but he's moved on.
Right. I see what you're saying. Well, let's move on ourselves, Colin, and talk about the Sunday Star Times once again, but a scoop by the investigative reporter Paula Penfold, which prompted her to reflect. I love this Substack. It's terrific. It prompted her to reflect on the impact of exposing misconduct. It's sort of like the one that we talked about recently on Midweek Media Watch.
Yeah. In fact, last week on Midweek Media Watch, we briefly mentioned the podcast Juggernaut, didn't we, also by Toby? And I think there's a clip of audio in, I think, episode 3 that I was just listening to a couple of days back with Paula Penfold reading out an RNZ news bulletin in 1992. Amazing. Anyway, no, she did a story a while back that we talked about, which she also reflected on in that Substack, which was about a guy called Fale Andrew Lesser, who was a kind of fabulist or fantasist, not quite sure of the right words, but he kind of blagged his way into the COP summit. He claimed he worked for MFAT and had a Yale degree and so on. A lot of things were highly exaggerated in his CV or kind of made up. And it really brought him down. He had to resign jobs and so on. And on her Substack, she reflected on whether that kind of costs people like who end up in that position their chance at redemption. A similar sort of story that she's also addressed in a way. This is about an army boss, a then lieutenant colonel, who sent what's described as a consensual explicit image of himself in uniform, or half the uniform, not wearing uniform from the waist down, on a sensitive overseas deployment in South Korea. And this was discovered. Apparently the Defence Force dealt with it in the form of a stern letter and a warning. The New Zealand Defence Force said the process was appropriate. And Paula Penfold said in her article, other senior figures disagree. And, the story starts as a bit of a yarn, her describing this image of the guy wearing half his uniform. No offence committed, according to the investigation. The image was shared on a personal, non-Defence Force electronic device within the context of a relationship, and he was free to take up a senior appointment after that, so it didn't harm his career.
Right. Okay. So he sent a dick pic while he was deployed overseas and while he was wearing half his uniform.
Yeah.
And so the question that is being posed here, I suppose, is whether sending a picture of that nature is actually a big deal in this day and age. And does it qualify as a news story?
Yes, exactly. Is it in the public interest, I guess? So Paula Penfold pondered that herself in the piece, saying, literally with the question, what's the big deal? Is it serious in civilian life? Dick pics fly all over the internet. But she said military sources who spoke to stuff said they did see it as a problem in uniform and on a deployment. There's various quotes here, and people saying, look, as a junior officer, if you've got a couple of strikes, you're learning, you're middle ranking, you might not lose your career, but once you're in that lofty position, a lieutenant colonel or senior officer, you really are vulnerable to coercion and blackmail, possibly a bit of a security risk, but also setting standards for others and so on. Also, this was sent through, they say, Facebook Messenger, and one military source told Paula Penfold that should never be used by deployed personnel for any kind of sensitive communication. That's the issue that I guess you wrestle with.
Probably not talking about those kinds of sensitive communications.
No, I don't think so. Yes, clearly not military. But, the point being, I guess, I think one person, when she discussed this on her Substack, she said someone who looked at it, when she kind of opened it up for comments, said the guy has created his own compromat, his own compromising material. So, on her Substack, why are dick pickers news, how something that looked private turned out not to be. She was very adamant that this was in the public interest, first because of the uniform, and then, the fact that the Defence Force didn't regard it as particularly serious. That handling of the issue was the other thing that sort of swung it for her. So she said even the fact that if there's division amongst people who know about the culture and the forces, about where loyalty should be, that itself is a problem. So she thinks those are the things that turned, what was a very private act into what she says was a valid story.
Yeah, I mean, someone's just sent in a text which says it was in uniform, so very inappropriate. And I suppose you can see that perspective. What did you make of her argument on this Substack?
Well, instinctively, for the reason when you said it's not that kind of sensitive communication, didn't have military value, that I initially was kind of swayed by that. If you hear military people saying, well, it is about standards and the ability to, convince others you ought to follow the rule, then you think, well, yeah, public servants. And as someone said to her, she wrote it in the Substack, not in the article, there are plenty of jobs where you would be fired for wearing a uniform and taking a photograph like that. That really is disreputable. So, maybe. But I guess it's the fact of the New Zealand Defence Force, if there's a public interest, I do find it interesting that this happened. And then that's the judgment that NZDF took when they were forced to confront it. So interesting, they were saying, okay, it's private, it's not ideal, not good for the uniform, etc., but that it should not prevent him, taking up a higher position, which he still holds. So that's it. But there's another part of the story, which is, how did this image actually become public? Under what circumstances? That's not clear in the story. Now, we've heard plenty about, and I don't want to speculate because I don't know, so I'm not saying this is a case of that at all, but we have heard stories about revenge pornography, stuff like that, motives we just don't know about. So if there are cases of people using images to put pressure on people after relationships go wrong, and there are laws for that, the Harmful Digital Communications Act and stuff, that also is an element of the story that I didn't feel was there, and that gives me a bit of unease about what was revealed in the Sunday Star Times.
Let's talk about radio stuff now. Let's talk about RNZ, shall we? And some new ratings, some new audience data out, which spells pretty good news for RNZ.
Well, it's better because, yes, we've talked about this before. There's a trend of declining radio audiences, particularly for RNZ National, the talk radio station News Talk ZB. Not the same sort of station exactly, but the closest alternative in talk, I guess, radio, and the national network itself, that was not having the same declines in audience. So something going wrong there. Music stations getting ahead of RNZ in the queue, slumping to I think the 8th most listened to station. And then we had also, this was concurrent with the Sutherland report. We'll come to a report written by the former head of news, Richard Sutherland, urging RNZ to up the output, refresh the output, move a lot of it to Auckland and so on, to arrest this slump in listenership that he believed was a settled trend that if it got any worse could make RNZ National a bit irrelevant. So in the latest figures, RNZ National back over 500,000 listeners in an average week. It's 25,000 extra. And that's the target, incidentally, that RNZ set for the end of next year in kind of rebuilding and bringing in these changes, bringing in a chief audio officer to shake things up. all of the main shows, the likes of Morning Report, Checkpoint, etc., Saturday Morning and others, all up in Auckland as well, a wee bit, which is important and something RNZ is really focused on, but has had trouble with down the years. RNZ concert down a little bit though, which is a reversal of the previous trend, possibly some going from concert back to national, who knows, but all over the RNZ National is back to third among all stations nationwide. So News Talk ZB, about 100,000 listeners ahead of them on this weekly listenership. The Breeze, a music station, second on about 550,000. So back up that ranking in this latest survey.
And it's probably reasonable. We don't need to linger on this point, Colin, but it's probably a reasonable point to mention that these, radio ratings data in these GfK surveys and so on, they are notoriously noisy, aren't they? They can change quite dramatically from one to t'other, much like any poll can, and really the trend is the thing that people look at.
Yes, and it's a sort of 3-month period that can be compared to months previous, but it takes a while for them to work out. It's not just on the blips that can occur within 3 months. So you get a really bad survey, it can take a year to kind of shift, but it does move up and down, and not always in terms of what you might expect, like big events being in the news. And we're coming up to an election year next year, which will disrupt the pattern, and that can go both ways. Exactly. Can attract people to a talk station that covers a lot of politics, or I think when we had the 2014 election, there was a big slump there too, so who knows. But coupled with the digital growth in RNZ,
which has been dramatic.
Yes, it has, and steadily increasing, so going the other way. And I think all this, there've been articles for Stuff, for example, had an article in the weekend, could RNZ soon become our second largest news website? And of course, they'd love that because the second largest website is the New Zealand Herald, who are their deadly rivals in, commercial news online. For RNZ, they'll be wondering what it is, and they put out a statement saying, we've only just embarked on, appointing a chief audio officer, shaking things up, changes to Morning Report. None of those things I think could possibly have made a difference in this current survey. So, maybe if it worked through, we'll see. It might be weird if the next survey records another fall again, and commentators will put 2 and 2 together and say, well, maybe the things you're doing to arrest the decline aren't really working, and drawing the wrong conclusion. So it'll take time to get the full picture, but certainly it's good for RNZ, coupled with that digital growth, that together the audience is going up and getting closer to the stations that they were measuring themselves against.
So does this spell an end to the RNZ in crisis coverage, do you think?
Who knows? It depends on the next survey and where that goes, and the one after that. There will be, because of course everyone who writes about this, particularly in the commercial area, does have a vested interest in how that goes. But for RNZ, I think the main thing is, they were written to by the minister, so was state-owned TVNZ, saying, I want to see increases in audience. I want to see better results on surveys on trust and your trustworthiness. I want to see more efficiency. And in TVNZ's terms, that's a real commercial numbers game as well. For RNZ, it's just about managing within a reduced budget of government funding. So RNZ, I guess, has ammunition to be able to take to their stakeholders in government and say, well, you asked us to do things about these 3 things, and they're able to point to an uptick in all 3 of them.
Colin, it is December the 3rd, 2025. There are still 22 days until Christmas. Some people would say that makes it too early in December for Christmas cheer and celebrations. But is it too early for the Media Watch Christmas Grinch? What do you think?
No, it's the exact right time for the Media Watch Christmas Grinch.
I can see you in your Christmas Media Watch Grinch hat. Look at that. Excellent.
I think that part's in your mind. I would not acknowledge Christmas in that way, nor the Grinchiness. But I think it's still too soon. That's the thing. And I realise I'm a bit of an outlier in this, and we are getting close to the point where it's fair enough to reference it. But that, for example, that memo that went out to RNZ staff announcing good news in those audience figures, they were good news to round out the year, was how it was described. Now, I think that's wrong. It's still about 10% of the year left. Toil until Christmas Eve. Late on Christmas Eve, I say. No slack on. Absolutely, must carry on. And earlier we heard the Prime Minister appearing on News Talk ZB on Monday for his regular interview. This is how it began.
News Talk ZB.
23 minutes away from 8. Sport after 8, of course. The Prime Minister in the studio with us, being a Monday morning. Good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. Good to be with you.
Before the news, I didn't float the idea. Lammy in UK has floated the idea that we get rid of jury trials.
So there's the music that you're complaining about.
Didn't hear a word of what he said. All I could hear was that stuff in the background. Ring ding ding ling ding ding ding. No. Too soon. Not yet. 2 days before Christmas, maybe, not now.
What have you got against Christmas?
Nothing.
Colin?
Well, partly because I haven't made many plans for it, so it just makes me anxious. So okay, it's a personal thing. I'm going to admit it, but I just think it's not just Christmas. Let's broaden this out. It's like the year in review stuff.
Yeah, right.
The likes of Apple and YouTube. Big things coming up when I log in saying, look at our year in reviews, but just the year's still going. There could be the best podcast in the world may begin in 2 weeks' time.
It's true.
And
it's true. There's still time for me to make my Spotify Wrapped different to last year.
In fact, when I came in the studio, you were talking to Duncan Grieve. I wanted to, get in the talkback and say, before you let him go, ask him why did he do his review of the year with some of the media agencies and put that out on November the 25th. 5 weeks to go.
So when do you think that all of these end of review things should be coming? Do you think that the people who put them together should be toiling away on December the 23rd to get them out on Christmas Eve so that people have got some stuff to talk about on Christmas Day?
Yes.
Right, okay, there we go. Colin Peacock. And the first Media Watch Christmas Grinch segment of the year. One last talking point tonight, Colin, also checking out last Friday. Simon Dallow, after 2 decades on One News, he signed off wishing everyone a Merry Christmas. So here you go. To be consistent, you're going to have a go at the legendary Simon Dallow now. Yeah,
he's allowed to get. So Mike Hosking is giving his presents to the Prime Minister on Friday this week so he can go on holiday, which is also unacceptably early, but that's Chris Luxon has had a good go at him about that. Simon Dallow retiring for good from One News, I will allow that. Here's how he checked out last Friday.
So many memorable events along the way, good and bad, and our collective shared experience is what binds us together as people. On that note, to you and your loved ones, I wish you a Merry Christmas and a sunny summer ahead. Paul Mariu, good night and good luck.
And I thought it was a reasonably classy way out, but that choice of words there, good night and good luck, that really struck a sour note, or maybe I should say made extremely sour. One commentator who uses the name Media Watch for his columns on the Daily Blog, that was Martin Bradbury. He said, Simon Dallow's sign-off was too clever for stupid Kiwis, and that's fitting.
Wait, what? What?
Yeah, he said it was, that's the words of the legendary American broadcaster Edward R. Murrow, McCarthyism, the guy who pushed back. He says it's perfect for the kind of dumpster fire our political media landscape is with alt-right billionaires running NZME, just depoliticised middle-class library, wanky wellness fans running RNZ, all of that. Good night and good luck indeed. You had this massive spray at the media, and I think it wasn't really about Simon Dallow quitting or that he co-opted the words of Edward R. Murrow. I think there were just a few things he wanted to get off his chest about
that. That doesn't sound like Martin Bradbury to me. Colin Peacock, thank you very much as always, and we'll catch you at the same time next Wednesday.
Sure thing. See you then.
That is Mr. Midweek Media Watch, and indeed the Media Watch Christmas Grinch.